One of the brand new features being added in Minecraft's upcoming winter drop is the pale oak wood type. This provides a really nice white color of wood that we've been asking for a really long time. That got me thinking about all the other wood types in the game, and currently there are a total of 12 of them. These are some of the most helpful building blocks in the game. I'd say a majority of Minecraft builds include at least one of them. But with so many different wood types, some are bound to be worse than others. So today, I thought it'd be fun to rank all 12 Minecraft wood types from the worst to the best. Now some of you may be thinking, why didn't I just wait for the winter drop to release before making this? Because I want to make it now, you're not my mom. Now based on the title of this video, you may think this would be a super straightforward ranking, but as always, I've managed to complicate it. That's because I have to admit something. I lied to you guys. See, this isn't just one ranking, we're doing 5. See, there are actually a lot of aspects that go into making a good wood type, and I've decided to separate them all out into different categories. The first ranking will simply be based on how good I think the plank, log, and the other blocks shown on screen look. I was originally considering separating the log, but I think this category works as is. Then we're going to be ranking all of the doors separately. This is a very important aspect of each wood type as the texture changes completely between each one instead of just being a simple recolor. Then the third ranking will be for the trapdoors, which are in a similar boat. The final category are the saplings and the trees. This will be the most complicated category, but it will come down to the looks of both and how annoying it is to chop down the tree. Then at the end of the video, I'll take each wood's average placement for the definitive Minecraft wood ranking. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right into the planks. Now I want you all to keep in mind that I'm not the greatest builder to ever live. No wait, of course I am, I made this. I like to think I'm at least average, but keep in mind that this ranking is all my opinion. Everyone is gonna like different wood types based on the aesthetic, it's just a given. But starting off with my least favorite, we have 12, crimson. This is one of our 2 nether wood types, and I've just never really loved it that much. It's a bit of a reddish and purplish color, and I personally have never found a good way to use this thing. The color is just a bit too specific in my opinion. Not to mention that this wood was completely outclassed by mangrove for me. Yes, obviously there are still ways to use a more purple wood type, but I'd rather them go all the way with one of the colors than still leave it a little bit red. Mangrove looks fantastic, so pretty much anytime I'd want to use crimson, I just go with mangrove instead. There's also the pretty big problem of the crimson stem. The logs of each wood type are fantastic blocks to frame builds with, but the crimson stem is just a bit of a mess. There's certainly still times you can use it, but the bright veins just make it a bit too hard to apply this wood type to a general build. 11, jungle. I have once again never really been a fan of this guy. The color is just a slightly more pink version of normal oak, and I have never come up with a great way to use it. The best I got is mixing it with normal oak to give a build a bit more detail, but other than that, I'm pretty stumped. Like crimson as well, I also don't love the log texture. I feel like it's just a bit too green to work well in builds. I also don't like that the log texture is basically flipped on the side compared to the others. It makes it hard to build pillars with. Shouldn't jungle logs be the best by default since they're the only ones you can grow cocoa beans on? 10, acacia. This is definitely a bit of an improvement, providing a very unique orange color scheme. Unfortunately, this falls into the too specific trap. There aren't many builds where you would need an orange wood type, so that holds us back quite a bit. On the plus side though, I am a really big fan of the acacia log. It's a completely different color being gray, which I think is actually fairly helpful. I've definitely used the log for this wood far more than the planks itself. 9, warped. Here we have the second nether wood type, and I like this color scheme a lot more. This time it's a pretty nice blue color, which is far different from any of the other wood types. Problem again being there's not many builds where you would need a blue wood compared to all the other colors we have coming up. It does stick out a bit much, but when it does work, man does it work. I do have to say though, just like crimson, I'm not a fan of the log. Honestly, it might just be my least favorite of the bunch just because the red veins on crimson look a bit cooler. 8, cherry. This is just a nice pink color, much more distinct than the pink-ish we got on jungle wood. Like the last few though, it's a bit too specific of a color to work in many builds. Due to it being a bit of a lighter pink, I do think it's more useful than the bright blue and orange, but not by too much. I also still don't love the log here. The texture is just a bit too soft for me, and it also has the horizontal flip thing from the jungle logs. 7, birch. Alright, now we're getting into some of the more useful ones in general. This is a much lighter version of oak, which can certainly be helpful in a number of different builds. In fact, this is the first of the woods I'd say I've used to a large extent. I think I'm generally a fan of the darker colors, but this is still pretty nice. Unfortunately though, birch easily has the worst log for building. At least the nether stems can look cool, but birch is just way too messy. They look fine as the trees, but I don't think I've seen a build that really incorporated the logs themselves too well. 6, bamboo. This is by far the most unique wood type we're going to be taking a look at today. Not only does it not come from trees, but it also has a few blocks unique to itself, those being the mosaic blocks. And honestly, I don't care about them at all. On the plus side though, the wood itself is great. I honestly just think of it as a better birch. It's a bit more yellow, which makes it pop more, and it has a unique texture, which I think is neat. Plus the log here is so much better as it's basically just a green version of the plank, basically giving us 2 wood colors in one. Also, I find it really funny how the stripped texture is the exact same as a plank, except one side has a waffle. It is worth noting though that bamboo doesn't have a bark block, which is basically all the sides taking on the log look, but I do think that's okay in this instance. Overall, I think bamboo is a really nice wood type. Oh, and how could I forget the raft? 5. Mangrove. Alright, this one may be up a bit too high, but I have used this wood type a ton. Yes, the red color scheme is a bit more specific than everything else above this, but man does it just work extremely well. I'm a big fan of the color red. That's the Mario color. So I'm definitely super biased, but I just don't think you can go wrong with this. I especially love how it looks in contrast with Deep Slate, which is probably my favorite family of blocks in the entire game. The problem is this does once again have a pretty weak looking log. It's another sideways one, and I think in most cases you're better off just going with something like oak. 4. Pale oak. This might be a bit of recency bias, but the white wood just looks so good. I haven't gotten a chance to really use this for myself, but I am super excited to try it out in the future. I'm a big quartz fan because of the white color scheme, so it was inevitable that I'd love a white wood type too. Plus I really like the fact that we're finally getting stuff like fences, buttons, signs, and pressure plates in white. The heavy weighted pressure plate doesn't exist. This may move up or down as I get a chance to play around with it more, but as of right now, I'm a pretty huge fan. I do have to say though, while I think the log texture is cool, I'm definitely going to stick with the acacia log for gray just because I like the less messy texture. 3. Oak. I mean, it's the classic, the most basic of the wood types. If you think of wood in Minecraft, this is probably the one that first pops up into your head. It works great in a ton of different palettes, and it's really hard to go wrong with it. The log too is also super easy to integrate into builds. It honestly might be one of my favorites of the bunch. Not really much else to say on this one, it just works. 2. Dark oak. As I said before, I'm a big fan of the darker woods, and something tells me that might apply here. Again, I don't have too much to say on this one, but it works out so well in a large number of builds. It's probably the wood type I have used the most over the years. It's not quite my favorite aesthetically though, because that has to go to 1. Spruce. This acts as a perfect middle ground between both oak and dark oak. It works in basically every palette the other two work in. It really is just the perfect shade of brown. I've definitely moved to using spruce more and more over time, and I think a majority of the community agrees that spruce is great. It's just the most flexible wood type, so I think it deserves to be placed as the best looking plank. Alright, 1 ranking down, 3 more to go. You're about to see that the doors list looks a fair bit different from the planks, so I feel fairly justified separating these out. As I said before, each door gets an entirely different texture, so on top of the color, we have to also judge its actual design as well. Luckily though, since there's less to talk about, I think this section should go by a bit faster. Starting us off with 12, the acacia door. I have never liked this thing. Compared to all the other doors, there's just so much air and it looks super flimsy. I mean, I would not feel secure behind this thing. Oh yep, see, yeah, there's Jeff the Killer squeezing right through there. Not to mention that the orange color scheme is still super specific. 11, crimson. This one mostly comes down to the color. There aren't really many builds that are well suited for a purpley door like this, and those that are, I think the mangrove door just looks a bit better. In terms of actual texture though, I do think the bordered up design is kind of nice, though it is definitely a lot better as a double door than a single. 10, warped. While the color is a bit better than its other nether counterparts, I do think the texture here is a bit worse. The veiny design makes this really only work in a super specific type of build. When it works, it looks great, but a majority of the time, this doesn't look that good. This also definitely needs to be a double door. The way the veins go up looks very strange when it's a single. 9, bamboo. I honestly don't really like the more yellow color on this one, and I actually think birch works far better as a door. Design-wise too, I just don't really like the window here. I think the hole in the middle is just way too big, and it makes it look like you can just break the whole thing by pushing on it too hard. This is definitely a big improvement over what we've seen so far though. 8, cherry. Compared to the other doors, this takes a pretty interesting approach as the handle is actually in the center of the door instead of being at the side. I think it's nice to have this different type of door available to us, and the rest of the design looks pretty nice as well. The only problem is that the pink color wouldn't work well with many builds, but having the option for this color is always nice. 7, mangrove. Despite the red color, I actually think this works fairly well in a number of different builds. The design honestly reminds me a lot of the doors from the Mario series due to it being fully solid. Yes, I do point to doors in real life and say it's like Mario, why do you ask? This does have the minor problem of the texture not really standing out so much. The contrast of the colors on the door don't really differentiate themselves too much. Still though, I thought the design was pretty nice. 6, birch. This has a really unique look with the giant white bit in the center. It gives this door the look of having a window, but it's still completely solid, which I think is a cool idea. It's definitely hard for me to personally utilize it though. I haven't made many builds using this thing. The style seems to be a bit too specific, but I really like the idea behind this door. 5, jungle. This is definitely a huge jump up from where the wood itself placed. While I didn't like the wood color since in most cases I just prefer using oak, I think the color here works well because the door design between the two is completely different. The circular window at the top is a great feature to have, and this is the only door that has that right now. I also just really like how you can see the planks that make up this door. It gives it a really nice look. 4, oak. And here we have the classic. This is the Minecraft door, so it's really hard to go wrong with it. You could basically throw it on anything and the choice would be understandable. At the same time though, I can't say I love the design. This thing is littered with squares, and after all the other doors got added, it looked a bit weird to me. The window looks great, I have no problem there, but I don't know, I guess I'm just jealous of its 6-pack. Despite all of that, I think this door deserves to be placed here. I still use it all the time, and I think most Minecraft players do as well. 3. Pale oak. Once again, placing fairly high, we have our newest wood type. This was bound to be a good one for me since I have always wanted a white door type that I could open without the use of redstone. Not calling anyone out in particular. I imagine I'll be using this a ton in the future as it just fits with my general block palette fairly well. I will say though, I don't love the metallic bits at the bottom and top. Not that they necessarily look bad, I just think I would have preferred this door without them. 2. Spruce. I really like the design behind this one. Looks like a sort of medieval castle kind of door, and I think that fits well with a lot of the builds done in Minecraft. Like spruce wood itself, it's fairly flexible, though not quite to the same extent. But taking the crown as the best door is easily 1. Dark oak. This has been my favorite ever since they introduced it. It is a lovely modern looking door design, and it's definitely the door I have used the most. Of the door types, I think this is one of the most flexible and just the best looking. For me, this one was really no contest. 2 rankings down and 2 more categories to go. This time we got the trapdoors, which you may think would be too similar to the last ranking, but I actually think it's quite different. Yes, the trapdoor designs are based on their door counterparts, but making the texture on a 1x1 surface instead of a 1x2 can completely change the look. Not to mention that trapdoors have very different building applications than doors, as trapdoors are generally used to add details to builds. Obviously though, they can still absolutely be used as trapdoors. I imagine this section will be the quickest of the video. Kicking us off, we have 12 bamboo. This thing just looks super flimsy. Take what I said about the window of the normal door and apply it to the whole block. I feel like taking a step on this thing is just asking to fall right through it. I also just don't think there are many builds that need details in this color compared to the rest, but keep in mind that pretty much all the trapdoors are great. 11 acacia. I'm actually fine with how the design looks here compared to the door. It's mostly down to the color on this one. Orange is just a super specific color, and compared to the rest, I just don't think it's as useful. 10 warped. This is a very similar design, but instead of being straight lines, they get a bit wiggly. Honestly, this design might be harder to use than the last one since it basically needs to be in a build that would have wavy lines like this, but if you have a build like that, this would be excellent. I think I'm mostly just a fan of the blue color more on this one. 9 crimson. First time this guy got to come out as a better nether wood type. Congratulations. This is like they took acacia and rotated it on its side. Not that that matters too much, but I do like the look on it here. I also like the fact that they removed the handle as it makes it look more like a vent or something. Hey, I saw that. I also think the purple color on this one actually works somewhat well. It's still not the best, but I can see this being used more often than the last few. 8 jungle. Compared to the door, this one does kind of irk me a bit. I think it's just because the window on this isn't a perfect circle and is a little lopsided. On the door, this is fine just because there's a lot more space on it, but since the trapdoor is only one block, it feels a bit out of place. Still though, the color on this one is pretty strong and I can absolutely still see someone getting some usage out of this. I just think if the window here was a perfect circle shape, I would have liked this more. 7 cherry. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the design the cherry is using. The window and edges are each a perfect size to make a sturdy feeling trapdoor that you can still see through. Again, the only thing holding this back is the color. It's really hard to implement pink into a build in a good way. Purely going based on the design though, this is great. 6 oak. And here we have the classic, and I actually think the square design works pretty well here. It can be a bit difficult to use this for adding details to builds due to how many holes there are in this thing, but it can absolutely still be done because of how good the color is. I definitely think that as a trap door, this works extremely well, but I prefer when they can be used in other ways. 5 dark oak. Hershey's chocolate bar. This had the brave idea to ask, what if we took the oak trap door but filled in the windows? In my opinion, that makes it a bit better for adding detail to the sides of builds. This is our first trapdoor that is fully filled in, which I think are generally the best. The problem with the dark oak trapdoor though just comes down to the squares. If they're used too much in a build side by side, it can look pretty distracting, which stops me from using it so much. I still absolutely do use it, just not as much as I wish I could. 4 mangrove. This is what I was looking for with the jungle trapdoor. Funnily enough, this may be the most different trapdoor from its regular door as there's no holes in the original at all. Who knows, maybe someone just shot the trapdoor. The circle in the center of this is great for detailing as it basically lets any block behind it appear circular. I like to use this a lot with lighting blocks personally. The only problem with this is of course the fact that it's red, which doesn't work quite as well as the brown and whites. Still though, I'm a big fan of the circular center, which makes this my favorite trapdoor that's not fully opaque. 3 birch. I already like the door design well enough, but I think the white bit in the center works even better on a 1x1 space. I've definitely used this one quite a few times, whether it be for interior decoration or for adding curtains or something next to windows. This was also nice for a while as a sort of whitish trapdoor, but I think that got overtaken by 2 pale oak. This looks absolutely fantastic, and I think they did this perfectly. I know I'm going to be using this for all sorts of things like flower beds and so on. I mean, this basically took my main criticism of the door, being the large metal bits, and completely removed them, which I think was done certainly for the better. White is also just a great color to work with a ton of different builds, but I think my undeniable favorite trapdoor is 1 spruce. This is by far the one I have crafted the most over the years. It pretty much doesn't look like a trapdoor and just a block with a really nice looking texture. That might be a downside to some, but I can't deny how useful that is. I've used this for everything, whether it be flower beds, windows, furniture, shelves, and so much more. The spruce trapdoor also links into itself far better than any of the others. It doesn't look too repetitive when placed side by side, and of course the color is just really easy to use. I highly doubt most people will disagree with me on this one. But now it's time for our final and most complicated category. Now it's time we talk about the sapling and trees for each of the wood types. For saplings, it'll mostly come down to looks, but the trees are a whole other beast. Originally, I was just planning on ranking them based on how annoying they are to chop down, which will still be the main factor, but one of my members, Christian Flattery Sequel Edition, suggested I also take into account the other items you can get from growing trees, so I'll make sure to mention those when they're relevant. Fine, I guess I could talk about cocoa beans. Starting off with my least favorite, 12 mangrove. I cannot stand chopping these down. These are one of the tree types that will have branches grow into the leaves, which I always find super annoying because I always end up missing one and then there's just a huge pile of leaves not decaying above my base. These trees can also grow pretty tall too, which means you have to pillar up while chopping them down. And if all that wasn't enough, each one of these trees spawns with a bajillion roots around it that won't decay, so you have to chop them all down and throw them into a chest somewhere. Maybe I'm just extra heated because I've been using mangrove more lately, but man, I can't stand working with these trees. The propagules are also just the most ugly sapling of the bunch. 11 warped and 10 crimson. Just gonna cover these two together because they have the same issues. First off, while you can place them on anything, they can only grow if you put them on nylium, which just adds a bit of an annoying extra step. Then once you do have the trees, you realize the worst thing ever. The leaves don't decay. That means you have to mine each of them one by one, and since these are warp blocks instead of leaves, it takes a lot longer to mine them. Now sure, you could maybe say it's worth it because getting a good source of warp blocks could be helpful. Imagine being the guy who builds out of warp blocks. The reason these guys are above mangrove is because they can grow with shroom lights, which are nice, and the mushrooms themselves do look kinda cool. Crimson can also grow with weeping vines, which makes it my favorite of the two. 9 acacia. This one will be quick since we're past most of the problem children. The acacia trees look pretty cool in a savanna biome, but sometimes tall ones can be a bit annoying as the branches are a bit out of reach. Also, I've never really liked the look of the sapling personally. 8 dark oak and 7 pale oak. These are our first 2x2 trees, which I find to be really fun to chop down. No matter how tall they get, you can always do the staircase technique to climb to the top and safely back down. I honestly like them far more than 1 block wide trees since I don't have to pillar up. There is, however, a major price we have to pay for this. In order to grow these trees, it requires 4 saplings as opposed to 1. This can get really annoying because sometimes the trees only drop 2 or 3 saplings, which wouldn't be enough to make a new one. I have had a few occasions where I've had to run back to a roofed forest because I ran out of saplings, which has never happened for the trees that only require 1 to grow. As for the order between each other here, I think pale oak gets a slight edge. The sapling looks really cool and unique compared to the dark oak, and the tree itself has unique particles for leaves falling, which looks so perfect for a spooky atmosphere. There's also the resin mechanic, but that requires a creaking, and as far as I know, you can only get the hearts from naturally spawning trees. Oh, and it is also worth noting that dark oak trees can give apples, but that didn't really influence the ranking. 6 birch. Yeah, this is about as basic as a Minecraft tree can get. It looks like a Minecraft tree, that's for sure. Literally, the only special thing worth noting about the birch tree is the fact that it and oak can sometimes spawn with bee nests when growing from a sapling. Sometimes. See, now I have to rant about this because I actually have a visual on how useless this feature is. A couple years ago, me and my friends had a skyblock world, which you can actually see in the background of a few of my videos. Well, one day we wanted to get bees, but the only way to get them is from beehives. But after growing about 10 trees and not getting one, I decided to go into a creative world and grow a bunch of trees just in case we were doing it wrong. Look how many trees it took for one to appear. The chance is so minuscule that it's basically a non-factor. I doubt anyone outside of a skyblock setting would ever need to even think about this feature. Okay, rant over, birch is fine. 5 oak. This was actually more complicated to place than I was expecting it to be. Every part of my soul wanted to rank this guy low for one simple reason. Yeah, I cannot stand big oak trees. About 10% of the time you grow an oak sapling, they'll just be massive for no reason. And sure, you get more wood, but it's so much more annoying to chop down. The branches can easily get lost, leading to the same floating leaves problem we saw with mangrove. The fact that it's a chance thing too also makes it much worse. With that being said, why didn't I place it lower? Well, that's because technically this isn't the only oak sapling. Oak is also the wood type for the azalea trees, which many of you may not count, but whatever, I'm doing it anyway. Flowering azalea and its leaves are some of my favorite decorative blocks, so that really saved oak in the ranking. I guess it's also worth noting that you can get apples and rooted dirt from these in case you ever need them. 4 jungle. Despite me not being the biggest fan of the wood itself, it's hard to deny that the tree itself is actually quite good. That mostly comes down to the fact that you can both plant a 1 block version and a 2x2 version. So now there's never really a worry of running out of saplings since you're almost always going to get at least one. Now the 2x2 tree isn't perfect since branches can sometimes be a bit of trouble, but they're not that bad compared to some of the others we've seen. On the plus side, the giant jungle trees will generate with vines in case you need some for a build. Now unfortunately, I do have to bring down jungle trees a bit because for some reason it doesn't come with cocoa beans if grown from a sapling. This would be a super great addition, but I guess for now I'll just accept what we got. 3 cherry. While this doesn't have a giant variant like jungle, this does have easily the best looking sapling. Ever since this tree type came out, I have used so many cherry saplings in my builds. The bright pink is just a fantastic color and the shape is great great too. On top of that, when the tree is grown, this also has unique particles just like the pale oak, but this time being cherry blossom leaves. They create such a good aesthetic, so I'm a huge fan of this. The only thing holding this back is the tree can be somewhat annoying to chop down due to how it splits, but it's not that bad. 2. Bamboo. This is the most unique sapling because it's not a sapling at all. Instead, you just place the bamboo and watch it grow. It grows pretty quick, and I love the look of it. Most importantly though, that makes this the only wood type that you can automatically farm. Sure, the others you can use TNT dupers, but they still require player input to place a sapling. However, bamboo grows by itself and can just be broken with pistons. That makes bamboo extraordinarily useful as a primary wood source late game. Early game, however, it can be somewhat annoying. In order to turn it into wood, you need to craft 9 pieces of bamboo together, which means that harvesting by hand can get somewhat tedious with your inventory constantly filling. Though it does feel super satisfying to just mow down a ton of bamboo really quickly. But as for my favorite tree type, we have 1. Spruce. This is really not your video. Just like jungle, it has a 1 block variant and a 2x2 variant, which makes it super easy to collect a ton of. I also just like the look of the spruce sapling a decent amount, definitely a lot more than the jungle counterpart. Giant spruce trees also don't come with any branches, which make them very easy to chop down smoothly. And on top of all that, growing a giant spruce tree causes it to... This is easily the best way to get a ton of podzol, which is a block I really like the look of. Now to some this can be kind of annoying, but I personally always just have a dedicated spruce growing spot where I can just leave the podzol without worry. So for being really fun to chop down, really nice to look at, and for giving a good source of podzol, I think spruce is definitely my favorite of this category. But now it's time we take the averages to see the true ranking of each of the wood types. In case you're like 3 years old and don't know how averages work, basically I'm adding up all the placements of that wood and then dividing it by 4. Whichever wood has the lowest score at the end of this wins. This will go by pretty quickly, so starting off with the worst wood, we actually have a tie with 2 woods getting the same score of 10.5, being 12 crimson and 11 acacia. I knew these 2 would place low because their colors are just far too specific. In the case of a tie, by the way, I'll give a slight edge to the wood that performed better in the plank ranking since I think that's the most important one. 10 warped with a score of 10. The color on this one is definitely a bit better, but as I've said, still a bit too specific. 9 bamboo with a score of 7.25. Massive leap in the average, and I'm honestly a bit surprised to see bamboo so low. It's definitely being held back a lot by its poor showing in the trapdoor department. Here we have another tie with scores of 7, being 8 jungle and 7 mangrove. Mangrove is about where I expected, but jungle actually placed a lot higher than I thought. While I don't really like the wood, jungle did so much better in the other categories that it almost made up for it. 6 cherry with a score of 6.5. The sapling is definitely hard carrying this score. 5 birch with a score of 5.5. This is about where I expected it to be. Definitely one of the more used wood types, but not quite up there with some of the best. 4 oak with a score of 4.5. Being the generic wood type, it makes sense to place this highly. Coming in with another tie, we have 3 pale oak and 2 dark oak with a score of 4. Really happy to see the new wood placing up so high. As I said, it may be a bit of recency bias, but I think it'll turn out to be really useful. But to absolutely no one's surprise, we have 1 spruce with a score of 1.25. It's only missing a perfect score because of dark oak in the door category. Spruce is the fan favorite, and I think for good reason. Pretty much all of its elements just work super well for building. But anyways, that's it for this video. Were you expecting to see wax-weathered copper trapdoors in the trapdoor segment and hate me for not including them? Let me know in the comments. This turned out to be a far more complicated ranking than I was expecting, but I hope it turned out to be more enjoyable with the several different categories. I also just want to say that I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be able to keep up the weekly schedule this month because of college, but I'll still do my best. Before I go though, I've got to make sure to thank my members, being Yanni the Duck, Andres Valerio, SMA, B Major 2003, Mazio2, Miss Jadesalaw, Arson the Raboot, Sir Musty, Kids Trunks 15, Belandor, Puggles Are Fun, Trader Mo, Diluted Colors, Cinder CC, Shrugface Woo, Jade Avery, Pronto Clone, Thicky Reiki, SJ100, Ingenio TM, CW McCain, Tibby, JubeTube Z, Tesseract Nuclear, Mr. McMahon 5702, Sebi, Hippopotamus, Thick Rib, Jameson Pageson, Wilbur, Golden Slash 15, Frost, Stuffy Ant, Just Dex, Concanut, Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.